welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, this is Jessica with Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast, and I am really excited for the guest that we have today. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Lisa Lutz, and I'm the author of The Accomplice, which I think is the book we're talking about.
It is, yes. So, it's funny. So the Accomplice, before we get into plot, takes place in New York. And really the Hudson Valley, which is beautiful. But it is a twisty thriller that keeps the chills coming. And it is the story of Owen and Luna, who have been best friends since college. And I think their friendship seems to sort of perplex people because it's always, are they or aren't they romantically involved? And they're not. But it perplexes people even more because both Owen and Luna are mysterious in their own ways. So just talk a little bit about the story in your, I guess, from your perspective of what the premise is and just how this all began.
So I wanted to write about platonic friends, but what I was mostly interested in was sort of the idea of how well do you know someone? And we all have friends who we really think we know everything about them. We know whether they could kill someone or not kill someone. We know their dark sides. And I think we feel like we can predict their behavior, but I was interested in sort of how many steps it would take, how much suspicion would be required for you to start doubting your own opinion. And so it's really, so much of the book is about sort of everyone in the book reframing what they think they know about someone and trying to reconcile that with the past. So that's sort of the germ of it.
Yeah, that's a really good description. It's funny because I read this quite a few weeks ago. And listening to your description, I think really pulled on a few threads in my mind just about, what sort of really made this unique. So yeah, as you mentioned, they are platonic friends. And I love that because there really is, I mean, to me in the beginning, you sort of wonder where it's going because it's very rare that you see, I guess, it's funny because you see people of the same sex and it's rarely will they or won't they, because I guess, that's the society we still live in, even though gay people and, bi people have been around for a while. Usually when you start reading a book about two women or two men, unless it's on the cover with romantic hearts, you know that's probably not the direction it's going in. But automatically when you start a book, be it a thriller or anything else where the protagonists are both of the opposite sex, you're like, okay, there's an affair going on. But one of the things that was super refreshing about this book, and again, this isn't even necessarily speaking to the plot, is that Owen and Luna really were best friends, the same way that two women would meet for the first time in college and become best friends and vice versa. That was so refreshing. So that kind of took it off the table right away. But that isn't to say that the closeness of their friendship didn't become a roadblock in their relationships. And that's kind of when you speak about how well do you know somebody, both Owen and Luna had been married to other people. And Owen, so the first bad thing that happens, am I allowed to spoil that part?
This is your podcast, it's up to you.
I don't want to give too much of the book away, but let's just say there is a murder that takes place, and it is one of their spouses, and automatically when the police are investigating, you start talking, well, they were really close with this other person. So automatically that puts both Owen and Luna in the frame of, well, was this a crime of passion? But you go back and forth between the present and their past. And there are a lot of things that no matter how close they are, they don't tell each other.
Right. And I mean, some things there's definitely secrets they've both withheld from the other person for decades. But a lot of the things are just also withheld from the reader. But I think that the key with the whole past is that I don't think Luna, if they didn't have the past they had, I don't think Luna ever would have doubted Owen. I don't think Owen would have ever doubted Luna. But because there is so much in the past that didn't feel fully resolved, it starts to inform the present. And that's sort of the main sort of trigger for how things unfold. I mean, obviously there's a murder and that has to be solved, and Owen is automatically going to be a suspect.
Right, of course. Yeah, I think that was, again, one of the really interesting things, and also just how you withheld and when you withheld from the reader who knew what when, both in the present and in the past, because even that wasn't so simple. And I'm being cryptic and cagey on purpose here, because really, while I was reading the book, I really wasn't sure what way the wind was going to blow. At first I was like, okay, I think it's this, and then it wasn't. You do know that Luna herself has some things in her past that might be a little bit more unusual than the things that Owen is unfolding, but you don't even find that out for a while too, and that was extremely interesting. I don't want to ask if, like, I don't want to necessarily ask if that was based on any particular story that you had read, but did you do any research just into the mind of somebody who had experienced trauma and how they might comprehend it as an adult?
I mean, okay, so I don't tend to, like, I'm sure there are things I've read about and heard about that have informed my writing, but I'm as a writer much less likely to pull from the headlines.
Right.
So, because I really like the whole freedom, like, I write books for a living. This is something I can completely control, turn it any way I want to turn it.
Of
So
course.
having any outside influence, I think automatically blocks my creativity. So yeah, no, I mean, I think that I had some familiarity with, I've had a lot of male platonic friends, and these are really solid long-term relationships, and they are different than your friendships with women. So, you know, that I might have pulled somewhat from my own life. But no, I wanted to write a semi-traditional crime novel, but then do my own thing in that there's going to be humor in it, because I think that even in the darkest times, people are funny. And there are going to be more eccentric characters because I only know eccentric people. But the thing with Luna and her secret, that was just something that I didn't have right away. I just knew I was going to be dealing with someone with guilt, and then I had to come up with what would make someone feel that much guilt. And it took me a while to figure it out.
Yeah, and I liked that while you're reading the book, you're sort of along for that ride as well. So I mean, I guess the traditional question here is always, are you a plotter or a pantser? When you were writing this, so you said that Luna's secret wasn't something you immediately knew. Do you usually go in kind of knowing how things are going to go, or do you do you go on a hike with the characters, so to speak?
I mean, I want to be a plotter because I hate all of the rewrites and reconfigurations, and then just this sort of, like, I don't have a great memory, I would argue I don't even have a great mind. So like keeping track of everything for me is a nightmare. I'm like an Alzheimer's patient with like post-it notes everywhere, even reminding me of the basics of the plot. You know, before I do an interview, I actually have to write down the characters' names because I forget them. Like,
Really?
yes,
Oh,
there's
wow.
something
Okay,
wrong.
cool.
Yeah, there's something wrong. So I want to be a plotter, but I just, I think I'm too lazy because it's not fun. Like most, I think if you ask a lot of writers, especially ones who don't plot, they're like, oh God, it's just exhausting. So I don't, but I will say that with this book, I knew the basic, and I mean just the outside frame of it before I started. So I knew the ending, the very, very ending, which I won't say. That I knew, but everything else in the middle had to be filled in. So there are often with books a lot of things that happen at the very end as I'm finally sort of realizing what I need.
You also capture just that when you're doing some flashbacks, you capture that life of, college and into your 20s just so well that it was kind of calling back to that period of my own time. It's like, oh yeah, that is sort of how life was. You were in that extended teenagehood with more agency. I have to say, like, that was just not even to speak for the twisty part, but that just made everything feel so real.
I'm really glad to hear it. Yeah. I don't know. It was fun to write that stuff. Yeah.
So I want to ask also, there's a lot of just really good family relationship stuff that comes up in this book. And again, like speaking back to, that time period when you would come back from college for Thanksgiving and take a friend to meet your family, which is always awkward, no matter who you're bringing back.
Yeah.
But the family of Owen, because you don't really meet Luna's family for quite a while, and that was fun, by the way. That was really interesting. You kind of wonder, okay, Luna is how old? So she's really been named Luna pre-Harry Potter.
Yeah.
What kind of person names their daughter Luna pre-Harry Potter? And then you're like, oh yeah, okay, cool, got it. But with Owen's family, you got that sense of, okay, these people are normal in the sense that they're messed up in their own way.
I mean, I think the way I look at them is they're the kind of family that seems really fun and normal. And then you realize, oh no, wait a second, they're not. So I actually don't think they're particularly, but I don't know what normal is. I think that's really for me.
Right. Yeah, that's like just it. Like you especially like when you would go home and you or to somebody else's home and you'd meet their family. For the most part, the family would be putting on their best front and making it seem like everybody is like Ozzie and Harriet. But then you'd always kind of catch those glimpses of, oh, right, this doesn't exist.
No, exactly. I mean, I have so many like strange memories of meeting friends' families, and one in particular, I remember when I met his parents. I don't think his sister was there. They felt so normal. I was disturbed. And then later I realized they weren't messy, but they were actually really fun and strange and not as normal as I thought. But the normalcy on the surface really like, because I'm not used to that, really messed with my head. But yeah, I always love writing about like different odd relationships and dynamics.
The police procedural part of it was interesting. Are you super comfortable writing within like a detective mindset?
Um, I'm comfortable writing uh, in the mindset of anyone. However, I'm less comfortable when I'm dealing with something that could there are like remembering laws or researching laws and procedure. That stuff's always a pain in the ass to me. I don't like research.
That's interesting to hear. And I appreciate you admitting that. Because I feel like the knee-jerk reaction of people would be like, yeah, I'm speaking to a librarian. I have to say I love research.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't even think.
No, absolutely no offense taken. I actually find it refreshing because that has to be difficult. Because as you were saying before, like you have a story you want to tell, but then, like you don't, that certain people are going to call you out on, well, do you get a lot of that?
I feel like there's so many crime writers I know where we have the same discussion, which is that, well, there's a couple things, but one of them is that no matter how many times we put a gun in a story, someone sends us a letter about how we did it wrong. Like I've had my gun passages proofread by gun experts, and I still get letters. So I limit how much of a description I'm going to get into with all of that for sure. But yeah, so much of writing for me is like, I mean, we can be talking about a 1-paragraph passage, and the number of things I have to Google just to get the basic words right. And I know other writers do this too. It's like, even just trees. I'm like, oh yeah, what's that tree? What is it called? What is that thing called? It's very exhausting.
So have you also written for television?
Yeah, I wrote on HBO's The Deuce and on Meg Abbott's show Dare Me.
So how is writing for television different than writing a novel?
I mean, it's completely different. It's and you don't even start writing until you have, so it's fully plotted basically before you're alone to write. And then it's night and day. It's I mean, it's still writing, but it's a totally different form.
I would imagine, and having a few other people on here who've written for television as well, I think it sounds like there's a little bit less freedom in it.
I mean, there's infinitely less freedom on every level. And I'm not disparaging it. It's also like a very unique and interesting medium. And I love television, and I've enjoyed writing for it, but I do really love, like, novels are, for me, they're freedom. Everything about them is freedom. Your daily life is freedom. And your editor, no matter what, if you really disagree with your editor, you win that argument. That's not the case with TV.
Yeah, that's certainly the sense that I get. So are you working on another novel as we speak?
I'm working on it in my head. I've been trying to move for like 6 months now. So I've had a hard time like having enough of a schedule to really like write. So I'm hoping if I ever get out of this house, I can start again. But yeah.
Do you, in pre-pandemic times, would you usually write at home, or would you find like a cafe to write in, or a library?
I wouldn't. Yeah. Sorry. No offense to libraries. I have a weird process, and I think I talk to myself a lot, and I can't be in public. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know about that. I think a lot of people are comfortable talking to themselves in public, but I understand.
I would not be.
I understand your hesitation.
Yeah, no, it's not for me. And I need a lot of space. I need a giant screen. I got a lot of things. Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. So what have you yourself been reading? Do you read a lot while you're planning your books? And do you read a similar genre to what you write?
I definitely read a similar genre to whatever. God, this question is like, this is like my characters, like, oh, I gotta write this down. Okay, so recently I've Julia Dahl's The Missing Hours. Oh, God, it's really embarrassing if I get this wrong. Alison Galen's The Collective, the book that Chris Pavone has coming out in Mayish, April. That's very good. Right now, I can't remember. Something in Lisbon, 2 Nights in Lisbon. Oh, this is terrible. Sorry.
No.
I always need to write things down. But those are the recent books that I've read and liked. And, because I know a fair number of crime writers, I tend to read a lot of people I know. But
that's another like an interesting point, because a lot of times, and I'm looking, yes, you were correct. 2 Nights in Lisbon. Do not be embarrassed.
Oh, good. Phew.
This is what fact checking is for.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. It's interesting because sometimes when we talk to people who are, they write in a specific genre for the most part, they'll say that they can't read their peers. So it seems like it's either one or the other. They'll be like, no, I only read fluffy romance because if I read in my own genre, I'm afraid, but I'm going to pick up somebody else's voice. But
no, that's not a fear of mine.
That's awesome.
I'm very much in my own thing. Yeah, I don't ever try to emulate. It's never been my style. So, and the thing with reading only books by your friends, which sometimes feels like is all I do. I know that I'm not going to get bored, and I get really angry when I'm bored. So,
how did you begin as a writer? This is kind of like a backwards interview, I guess, although like we're always hesitant to call our interviews, they're more like chats, like let's talk about stuff in your book and other stuff. But how did you get started as a writer?
I've always written. I was very young when I wrote my first screenplay and thought, oh, I'm going to do this. And then 10 years later, after working on the same script for a decade and actually getting a movie made that's very, very bad, it became clear that I didn't have a career in it. And I was in my early 30s at that point and hadn't developed any other job skills. So I had the idea for the Spellman Files. It was originally a screenplay. And I just decided, I think it's a novel. And I took about a year, wrote it, and then I just did all the things you're supposed to do. I got a book on how to find an agent. I got an agent. And then that's it. That's all I've been doing since.
Well, thanks so much for talking with us. When you do move, wherever that may be, and the book comes from your mind to paper, I do hope that you will come back and chat with us.
I'd love to. Thank you so much for this.
And we are looking forward to recommending The Accomplice to everybody. It really was a lot of fun, and I really did have a hard time figuring out what direction it was going to go in, which I appreciate because I read a lot of thrillers myself. And sometimes I feel like you start to see where the dots are going to come up. And in this one, every time I thought I saw it, it was a diversion. So I really appreciated it. It was definitely a lot of fun to read.
Thank you so much.
So once again, this was Jessica with Syosset Libraries Turn the Page podcast. Our guest today was
Lisa Lutz.
And in the background, you might hear my neighbor's snowblower because this interview takes place after a snowstorm across the Northeast. So wherever you are when you're listening to this, I hope you're either cuddled up reading The Accomplice or getting ready to read The Accomplice or out of the snow. Thank you. And we are going to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.